Okay, so I've regained my composure and we're ready for another wonderful moments of Bet on a Cowboy by Julie Benson. Here we go. Page 214. Filming the last two shows at the ranch had as many pitfalls as a cattle ranch had cow pies. One wrong step and he'd be knee deep in manure. It's not that I don't want you to meet them, Mom. I'm remembering what happened the last time a film crew was at the ranch. I don't want to risk that, especially since your treatments are going so well. The similarities between his situation and the jeans commercial Rory had filmed was too many to ignore. Like his brother, Griffin had taken the job to get the money to pay for their mom's treatments, and kept that information from her. But the worse than that, Griffin's plan to choose that woman most likely to turn down his proposal leaned toward the shady side of the road. Granted, this was the reality TV, and who could say that the bachelorettes had their own motives, were even honorable? But would his mother see things that way? Probably not. My collapse had nothing to do with the filming the commercial. My stress resulted from the fact that my sons kept things from me. Things regarding the finances of this ranch, of which I own 51%. Now, unless there's something you haven't told me, I can't see any other reason for not to let that show film here. Page 214, 215, 216. Have you signed anything? I had a lawyer go over the contract yesterday. I have it here in front of me. He'd never gotten a lie past his mom before. What made him think he could do that now? Stick with the truth as much as possible. Mom, I'm worried about your health. Letting the show be filmed at Twin Creeks isn't worth the risk to either of us. They're going to pay us to film here. The amount she had tossed out surprised Griffin. I'm not passing that up. I'm signing this contract right now. Everything will be fine. The last thing he wanted was his mother and Maggie in the same state, much less on the same ranch together. No way would everything be fine, at least not for him. His mom would need only a second to see something was going on between the two of them. As Maggie stood on the porch of Twin Creeks Ranch House, she couldn't believe how her life had changed in just a few short months. Talk about things taking a 180-degree turn. The flight to Denver had been horrendous. Although she was normally a great traveler, her stomach had protested violently at the slightest patch or roll of the plane. Replaying her last discussion with Griffin, especially his excitement over finding out she wasn't pregnant, hadn't helped. He smiled all the way too brightly, and that was fantastic news. Not good, but fantastic. And hustled out of her office. And now here they were, back where they met to film the last round of dates and the finale. Soon he'd propose to one of these women standing on either side of him, and Maggie would go on with her life without him and raise his child. I feel silly standing on my front porch when I've got a key to this place, and to top it off, there are cameras filming this whole thing, Griffin said. We've gone over this. I think your mother's first reaction is the best way to go. Now quit giving the editor more to cut and knock on that door. A minute after he did, so tall, sturdy woman with short black hair sprinkled with gray and a familiar bright smile and dimples opened the door and enveloped Griffin in a hug. I've missed you. You look so good, Mom. I'm doing much better. Griffin's mother caressed his cheek. Now let's get everybody inside. 216, 217, and 218. Mrs. McAllister stepped aside for the finalists to enter, and they took their coats and staring at the two bachelorettes with what Maggie could only describe as "you gotta be kidding me" look. Both women wore short, skin-tight mini dresses and stilettos. What would one woman, much less two, think dressing like that was a good idea when meeting a man's mother? Women who wanted publicity and recognition more than they wanted the man. Griffin shuffled from foot to foot. Maggie smiled, wondering if he was embarrassed by the bachelorette's outfits. He nodded to the leggy blonde to the left. Mom, this is Stacy. She's an actress who wants to start her own production company. Nanette, I'm so glad to meet you. She held out her hand. I look forward to us getting to know each other. Griffin turned to the woman grinning like a hyena on his right. Mom, Olivia's a lawyer. Beaming at Griffin, Olivia said, Nanette, I've wanted to meet the woman that raised such a wonderful man. That was 16, 17, 18, and 19. Things were getting deep in here. Pretty soon Maggie would need a shovel. The first thing she noticed as she followed the group was winding staircase to her left, and the house, while large, conveyed a homey feel. Pictures of the McAllister children at various ages dotted the space, and Maggie's gaze locked on a picture of Griffin standing next to a russet-colored horse. He couldn't have been more than a kindergarten age, and an animal dwarfed him. Even then he possessed that devilish twinkle in his eyes, and that said he'd lead the girls on a merry chase. As Mrs. McAllister led everyone through the house, she said, "I hope you two brought sensible clothing and shoes. You're a little overdressed from the ranch. You look like you're headed to a singles bar at a corner of Main and Pick-me-up Street, is what Maggie's thinking. Fancy cocktail party in the downtown New York City." Maggie hid her smile. Something told her that wasn't the first comparison that had jumped into Mrs. McAllister's head. Olivia said, "I brought jeans, the cutest little boots." Griffin's mother stopped and faced the bachelorettes. "They better be work boots and not stylish ones. Those things won't hold up around here." 2:19 and 2:20. Miss McAllister looked past the finalist to Maggie. "Now she's dressed for the life on the ranch. She's wearing sturdy jeans and winter hiking boots. Are you Maggie?" "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. McAllister, I am. The editor would earn his salary piecing together this footage. Pretend I'm not here." Instead of doing that, Griffin's mom walked toward her and glanced over her shoulder at the other two women and said, "Please, call me Nanette." With the older woman's obvious displeasure over the finalist using her first name without permission still in the air, they continued the tour of the house. Maggie decided no way would she want to get on Nanette's bad side. A Christmas tree with homemade childhood ornaments stood in front of the massive window. Garlands and bits of gold tinsel were scattered across the mantel. The feeling of family and shared holiday memories was everywhere, vividly reminding Maggie of what she'd missed since her mother had died. Maybe this year she'd get her box of ornaments from the closet and buy a tree. Snapping out of her nostalgia, Maggie glanced around the room. The finalists sat on the couch, and when Griffin headed for a chair some distance away, Maggie instructed him to sit between the women. She asked Nanette if the leather chair to one side worked for her. With the cameras rolling, Griffin launched into a resuscitation for the finalist bios. What was he thinking? "Cut," Maggie snapped. "Griffin, what's going on? You're acting like you're in a job interview again. Lighten up and have some fun." "I need to speak with you, Maggie." She recognized Griffin's "I don't want to do what you're telling me" look and wanted no part of it. "That's not necessary. I'm sure you remember what we discussed the last time this came up." "That wasn't a question." "Griffin, now is not the time," she responded in her firmest director's tone. Instead of dropping the issue, Griffin stood and stalked across the room toward her. When he stopped in front of her, he whispered, "We're going to talk in the kitchen. Choose how you're getting there." Surprise flashed in Maggie's eyes, and Griffin could see gears in her mind turning as she tried to decide if he meant that as a threat or not. "Don't make me throw you over my shoulder." 2:20, 2:21, and 2:22. She paled, nodded, and followed him out of the room. Once he was in the kitchen, he said, "This is my house, my mother. I'll handle this my way." "I'm willing to let you do that to a point, but you need to remember I have to get good footage out of this." "My mom's already taken them to task about how they're dressed and not asking permission to call her by her first name. Isn't that enough?" While the two women had brought the clothes comment on themselves by dressing for a party at the Playboy Mansion, he should have warned them what a stickler his mom was for manners. Nanette McAllister had raised her children, no matter how old they got, to call their elders Mr. or Ms. until they were given permission to do otherwise. Maggie laughed. She did have a point. Griffin joined in. "They might be overdressed, but you do look like you're ready to get right to work." She tugged on her mud-colored sweater. "In case you've forgotten, I am working." "I meant you look like you're ready to muck out the horse stalls." "Luckily, I'm behind a camera, and what I'm wearing doesn't matter." "Good thing I know how great you look under those clothes." "Shame on you, Griffin." Color flared in her cheeks, pleasing him and throwing her off her stride. "If you don't liven things up, we'll be shooting here all day and to get good footage," she warned. "That's not my top priority." "What's the problem?" his mom asked as she joined them, hands on her hips, her gaze darting between him and Maggie. "We can hear you two picking at each other all the way in the other room. Griffin, I've never heard you speak like that to a woman. I raised you better than that." Great, just what Griffin needed. Dealing with his mom and Maggie, he was doomed. Page 222 and 223. Page 232. You and Griffin seem close. Oh dear, this wasn't going where Maggie wanted the conversation going. We've become friends. The lie almost stuck in her throat. From what I saw of the two of you here in the kitchen the other day, I'm thinking it's more than that. Griffin's never shown that much emotion with a woman before. He does get angry with me. It's because you call a spade with him. Most women don't, you know. With his looks, I'm not surprised. Women see his pretty face and will do anything to keep him. They tell him what he wants to hear, which is the last thing that man needs. When the tea kettle screeched, Nanette poured water into the brown ceramic teapot, set the timer, and joined Maggie at the table. I have to admit, I do enjoy matching wits with him, she admitted. He looks at you differently than he does those dolled-up finalists. It's the same way Rory, that's her other son, looks at his wife Elizabeth, when he brought her here. Needing glasses or being delusional must run in the McAllister family. That was page 232, 233. Here's 234. You've got the wrong impression. There's nothing between me and Griffin. And in her mind, she's thinking come September, what's between us will be waking me at the night for 2 o'clock feedings. Maggie, I'm buying that like I would a 3-legged horse. What could she say? If she kept denying things, she would sound like was protesting too much, sometimes saying nothing proved the wisest course. I suspect you'd be good for him. He needs someone confident who will stand up to him. He needs someone who will make him think, someone who will make him use his head for something more than a place to hang his hat. Has he always been, Maggie paused, not sure how to phrase the question to Griffin's mother, stubborn yet laid back? That boy does have more pride than sense sometimes, Nanette smiled. All my children are intelligent. Roy came out of the womb knowing what he wanted to do with his life, and Avery knew in high school she wanted to be a vet. But not Griffin? Nanette shook her head. He was good at a lot of things, football, debating, math, but he didn't have passion for anything. The timer dinged, and Nanette crossed the kitchen and poured 2 cups of tea. I'm not sure either one of the finalists are right for him. Maggie thinks in her head, I know they're not. After taking a calming breath, Maggie said, they're both wonderful, accomplished women. From what I've seen so far, they cater to him too much. Women don't realize that Griffin gets bored easily. If something doesn't challenge him, he moves on to the next thing, and that catches his eye. Page 234 and 235, 236. Is that why he liked bull riding? He enjoyed the challenge of it. He liked matching wits, so to speak, with a bull. He researched the animals that were at the event, studied their behavior. He knew what moves was likely to be made. It was tough on him when he had to give that up. He hasn't been the same since. I know the reason he quit had something to do with a car accident, but none of the articles explain the injuries. If you want to know that story, you'll have to ask him. Griffin saw Maggie tear out of the barn and wondered what had happened. When a few minutes passed, she didn't return. He halted the chute and went in search of her. He hadn't realized how worried he was and how hard his heart was pounding until he found her seated with his mom at the kitchen table. While he wanted to race across the room, sweep Maggie into his arms, and reassure himself that she was okay, he instead counted to 10, then strolled over to his mom. After he kissed her on the cheek, he turned to Maggie, noting how pale she appeared. There you are. I wondered where you'd gone. And in Griffin's mind, he's thinking, and I grew frantic when I couldn't find you. He sank into the chair between the two women. Why'd you leave? Maggie explained that breakfast had upset her stomach. You sure that's all it is? You could have altitude sickness, or maybe you're coming down with something. He stared at her. You look pale. Are you running a fever? He turned to his mom. Where's the thermometer? His mom patted his arm and grinned on her face. In the bathroom cupboard to the left of the sink. While he located it, Nanette continued, my daughter-in-law Elizabeth had a rough bout of altitude sickness once. For a while we thought we might have to take her to the hospital. Do you have a headache or feel dizzy? Maggie shook her head. I swear I'm fine. Griffin returned and handed her the thermometer, and she stared at him and said he was being silly, but then he dutifully popped it in her mouth. I finally found a way to keep you quiet, he teased. She huffed and glanced at him. She couldn't be that sick if she was acting this feisty, but what if she was? Page 236 and 237. Page 238 and 239. Whoa there. He was being silly, worrying about her. She'd be fine, and he had other things on his mind, like making sure he chose a woman who could turn down his proposal. Electronic beep echoed through the room, and Maggie took the thermometer out and looked at it. 98.4. I'm fine. I think you should stay in here tonight, just in case, his mom suggested. That's not necessary, Maggie insisted. We found Elizabeth lying on the bathroom floor, too weak to stand or call for help. Nanette added, her gaze filled with concern. Is that anyone staying in the cabin with you? Alternate altitude sickness could be serious. What would Griffin do if he learned tomorrow that Maggie had become seriously ill during the night, with no one there to help? He placed his hand on her arm. Mom would be up all night worrying. You don't want that, do you? A silly grin came on her face. Maggie said, I'd have to stay then. I wouldn't want to cause your mom to lose any sleep on my account. Maggie relaxed on the bed in the McAllister guest room. She hadn't wanted to stay there. More than likely, morning sickness had caused her stomach troubles earlier. But when Nanette and Elizabeth almost ended up in the hospital because of the altitude sickness, Maggie decided she couldn't risk the baby's health by staying in the cabin alone. When a knock sounded on the door, she went to answer it. Griffin was standing there with a heaping pile of roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans in one hand, and a glass of water in the other. The aromas of the home-cooked meal wafted over her. Since you didn't come down to dinner, I brought dinner to you. You shouldn't have gone to all that trouble. I'm not very hungry, she told him. She avoided dinner because she couldn't bear to see Griffin's family, to get to know them, find out how much they cared for each other when she knew she was depriving her child of that family connection. Griffin stepped past her into the room and placed the plate on the desk. I'm going to sit here until you eat all the potatoes at least. You need the carbs and you should drink as much water as you can tonight. She sat in the desk chair and scooped up a small forkful, praying that the food wouldn't upset her stomach. The creamy, buttery mashed potatoes tasted heavenly. Tears filled her eyes. My mom used to make potatoes like these. What was she like? 238, 239, 240. Her mother had been a compassionate, caring woman who had grown too old too fast because she married the wrong man. She worked hard to provide for me. By the time my father left, my brothers were out on their own. They had stayed in touch with their dad over the years and encouraged her to, but Maggie wouldn't forgive him. When she thought of her mom, she saw a working woman, 2 jobs, trying to give her daughter a better life. Emotions welled up in her. No, Maggie refused to let her mind go there. She was a great cook like your mom, and she loved to sew. She made the best clothes. There you are, Griffin, a female voice said. A young woman stepped into the room. You must be Maggie. Mom said you were spending the night. Maggie stared at the tall, 20-something blonde beauty. Nanette had mentioned her. Oh, dear. I'm Avery, Griffin's sister. She smiled, and Maggie felt like a dandelion beside a rose. If he had any manners, he would introduce us. You didn't give me a chance, Avery, Griffin complained. Is there some point to this visit? Sugar's water broke. Everything looks fine, but I knew you'd want to know. Thanks, Doc. I'll be heading out to the barn. Griffin turned to Maggie. Avery's going to be a vet soon. Brains and beauty, life is so not fair. After reminding Griffin that she had her cell if he needed her, Avery left, and Griffin held out his hand to Maggie. Want to watch a foal being born? I have so much to do to prepare for tomorrow. We've been having this conversation like this lately. We both know work's an excuse. Why don't you want to be around me? In Maggie's mind, in reality, I want nothing more, but we can't always have what we want. When we met, you said that seeing a foal born must be a miracle, Griffin recalled. This is your chance to see for yourself. Hope filled his eyes, the kind that shone in a 5-year-old's, as he waited for his mom to say that she would take off work to attend his soccer game. I want to share this with you. Griffin's quiet plea reached inside Maggie's and squeezed her heart. They'd been in a barn, not most romantic of places. Why not go with him? She was already pregnant. What other trouble could she get into? Page 240, 241, and 242. Maggie and Griffin stood outside Sugar's stall. The still night broke only by an occasional whinny or an owl hooting. If anyone had told him 4 months ago that he'd be sitting in a horse stall with a woman that he had been with to enjoying simply being with her, he would have said that the person needed medication to control the hallucinations. Life took some crazy turns. I'm sorry about forcing you to attend that rodeo, Maggie said. If I could go back and change things, I would. I survived. I had that become the theme of his life, surviving? I admire you. I'm not sure that I would have handled things as well as you did. Has it been hard trying to find something to do after giving up bull riding? He stiffened, refusing to let her open those old wounds. Instead, he fell back on his tried and true strategy, avoiding a question by asking one. What would you do if you had to give up your dream job? I'm lucky because there are so many options in the entertainment. If I could be a director, I would write screenplays or TV scripts. Unfortunately, I'm a rodeo cowboy, can't ride. There aren't a lot of other choices, especially without an education to fall back on. Have you ever considered your own ranch? and he thought about her earlier questions and had been bad. Before the accident, that had been his goal. After he had saved enough money from the purses he won, he sold his share of Twin Creeks to Rory. Griffin had planned on buying his own spread. He kicked around the idea of breeding horses for the rodeo. He had forgotten how many dreams that the accident had killed. I'm not that ranch owner type. Since that fateful day, all he'd seen was what he couldn't do, and all he hadn't found was a new dream to chase. Had he given up? Deep inside, he knew he had. But was this how he wanted to spend the rest of his life? There had to be more. That's page 242, 243, 244, and 245. He never believed that before he met Maggie. Sugar groaned. Is she all right? Maggie asked with her eyes wide with concern. She's having another contraction. Horses do fine giving birth on their own. We're just here to make sure she doesn't have any problems. There was so much he wanted to say to Maggie, so much he needed to sort out. Griffin had lost a lot the last few years. The thought of letting Maggie go, of not seeing her again, left him feeling sick. While their boom was nothing like he'd ever experienced, that wasn't what he missed the most these last few weeks. He missed the way she challenged him, the way she made him laugh, and her enthusiasm for life. He wanted to ask her if she'd wait for him until he fulfilled his contract, but he couldn't say the words. If he did, he'd have to explain his true intentions, and a good girl like Maggie couldn't overlook breaching a legal contract. Uneasy with his thoughts, Griffin stood and walked to Sugar's stall and peered over the door. As the horse circled the stall, he wondered where he had gone wrong. Filming the show hadn't been anything like he'd expected, and he knew exactly where things went astray. The moment he danced with Maggie, holding her in his arms, had been his downfall. He stared at Sugar, now lying in the hay, and saw a tiny hoof appear. Griffin held out his hand to Maggie. Come here, it won't be long now. When she joined him, he pulled her closer to get a better view. Can you see the foal's feet? Maggie nodded, and Griffin stood beside her, much too near. His breath fanned on her neck, sent chills through her. When she inhaled his earthy scent, it filled her. The irony of them standing together, watching Sugar give birth, swamped her, and she placed a hand over her stomach. As they watched the foal's nose and shoulders slide into view, a while later the rest of the baby slipped out, and Sugar went to work to clean the newborn. Is it a boy or girl? Maggie asked. It's a filly. Do you want to name her? I couldn't. Why not? You'll be naming Griffin's child soon, she thought. That was page 244, 245, and here comes 246. Just because you suggest something doesn't mean I'll agree to it. She smiled. Typical Griffin. So much for that grand gesture. You know I'm not that kind of guy. Now, how about giving me a name? Her mom's name is Sugar. How about Spice? You know, they say sugar and spice and everything nice. Is that what you're made of? Then he laughed and shook his head. What a silly question. You may be sugar and spice, but the spice is chili powder, and there's a whole lot of it. I'm offended. Girl, I like things with a little kick. Maggie's mouth went dry, and how they'd gone from naming the foal to this conversation. She was sinking fast, and she better start swimming before she went completely under. If you don't want to name her Spice, it's no big deal. Sugar nickered and tossed her head. Her mom seems to approve of your choice, so Spice it is, Griffin stated. Unsure what else to do, Maggie said, Thanks for sharing this with me and for the honor of naming her. Page 250. Maggie stared into the horse's wide brown eyes. Charmers, why is life so complicated? He's not much of a thinker, so I don't expect any revelations, Avery said as she joined Maggie at the railing. You sound upset. I know we only met a few days ago, but can I help? I'm a really good listener. It's nothing, really. Just normal job headaches. Is it Griff? He can be a major pain in the butt. I can't imagine how hard it is working with him. He can be a bit stubborn, but he's not the problem, at least not technically. Her feelings for him, what to do about them, and her pregnancy posed the biggest problem. I'm worried about the finale details. That was true, too. She wondered how she could watch her child's father propose to another woman without having a major meltdown. With the way you feel about Griffin, this must be hard for you. Avery placed a hand on Maggie's arm. You should tell him that you're in love with him. Maggie had to work to slow her racing heart. I do care for him, but we're simply good friends, she said numbly. Neither of those women in there is right for him, his sister stated. If it weren't for the show, he'd already have grown bored and moved on. They both have good qualities. Our website polls predict that he'll propose to Olivia. Maggie swallowed hard. I think Griffin has come to care for them. Avery pulled away and shook her head. He doesn't. When he smiles at them, it's that "I'm tolerating you" smile. Trust me, I've seen it enough to know. And his voice is flat when he talks to them. There's no emotion there. Maggie thought about when Griffin smiled at the bachelorettes. They weren't that wide, toothy grin that he shares with her. That's 250, 251, 252, 253, and that's it for tonight. And I hope to finish this with you tomorrow, but we'll see. As if she read her mind, Avery said, "When he's with you, he's not looking over your head to see if he can find a bigger, better deal. That's only because he can't see over me." Why is it so hard to believe that he cares for you? Was Avery kidding? She must have the McAllister poor eyesight. I looked in the mirror this morning, in case you haven't noticed. I'm not his type. I know it's corny, but beauty is only skin deep, and you have so much more going for you than anyone Griff's ever dated. Sure, I annoy the hell out of him. Actually, that's the part of it. His looks don't matter to you. You're not trying to impress him. You challenge him and you make him think. No one has ever made him do that. He's about to propose to another woman. On the verge of tears, thanks to her annoying pregnancy hormones. Maggie glanced at her watch. It's later than I thought. I've got to run. Avery's hand wrapped around her wrist. Maggie, it's obvious something's wrong, and you could use a sympathetic ear. I am a good listener. Oh, I'm fine. Mom said you felt ill the other day, and now you're overly emotional. Is there any chance you're pregnant? Maggie's worst fear stared her straight in the face. Someone asking if she was pregnant. I appreciate your concern, but if I was pregnant, it would have nothing to do with Griffin. It couldn't. That was page 252, 253. Like I said, my biggest hope is to finish this with you tomorrow. We're going to see if I can, which I hope to, but we've got another jam-packed day off planned, so I'm hoping to get a lot done, but it's just going to depend on life in general. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you're staying safe, that you're keeping your social distance, that you're wearing your mask, washing your hands, and when you can't, use that hand sanitizer. God bless each and every one of you. Stay safe. Love you all.